Hello, welcome. This is John Miller, founding attorney of Rock Solid Law, and we really appreciate the large gathering joining us today to talk about our continuing series on estate planning issues. This morning, it is asset planning, and we appear to have hit a nerve because we have had our largest number of people sign up for this one so far in the series, and also we have a large number online, so thank you. The way we do this is I'm going to present for a few minutes, probably 10, maybe 15 this morning, because there is a lot of ground to cover. And then if you have specific questions that might be applicable generally to the group, I would ask that you type them in the chat bar, and I will address them toward the end of the presentation. Again, John Miller, Rock Solid Law. You know, asset protection. A lot of people are a little confused about what that's all about, but don't feel bad. Almost everyone is confused with what asset protection really means. I'd like to give an example, of course, without divulging any client privileges, but many years ago, over a decade, I was privileged to serve a fellow attorney who came to me to do a trust. And, you know, as attorneys generally are, this fellow seemed to know all about the subject matter and exactly what he wanted done. And so deferring to his apparent knowledge of the field, I prepared the trust in the exact manner that he described it, delivered a beautiful package to him, protecting him, his family, etc., given what he had told me. Well, as so many attorneys are wont to do, he made an investment in a business that wasn't probably the smartest idea, and of course the fellow had some assets. So when the business failed, rather than going after the operating partners, the creditors all wanted to come after the attorney. So he came to me and said, you know, where is the asset protection in this trust we've drawn? And I said, well, that's not something we ever discussed before. You never talked to me about asset protection being important to you, and therefore it wasn't included in the plan. So shame on me on that one. As I said, this is over a decade ago, and you know, life's a learning curve. So I remember that lesson every day in my practice since, and that is regardless of whether or not the client seems to think they know what they need, it's really important to do discovery, learn about what their goals and values are, what's important to them, so that we can provide actually what they need. So to the extent that you're not sure that you know what asset protection is about, the point is, don't feel bad. Now, I've done a good job this week. There are no tissues lying around behind me, and I think my staff will be reasonably proud of me. I just have my handy dandy hand sanitizer here. But I do notice that I have cut my daughter's head and my son's upper torso out. So I'm just going to make a slight adjustment to the screen so that I'm not just seeing his feet dangle down above my right ear for the remainder of the time that we're on the phone. So asset protection, what is it? It is keeping what you have earned safe. And I'm really pleased. A lot of you know that I am now a member of a small national team, which is arguably unsurpassed in excellence in asset protection and other estate planning matters. And it's such a privilege to work with these lawyers and other people in the area now, so that I can feel fully confident of Rock Solid Law's ability to provide the very best in estate planning and asset protection services. So the clientele of this group goes everywhere from mom and pop operations all the way up to serving a former president of the United States. So if you wonder why I have good faith and confidence in the fellows and ladies that I'm working with, that is exactly it. So first off, who's your biggest creditor? We consider your biggest creditor to be the United States government. So a lot of asset asset protection planning is deciding whether you are only going to pay the mandatory taxes or whether you're going to pay some voluntary taxes too. It's about maximizing your prosperity during your life. And yes, it's about who you will share your love and your life's abundance with. I say that's those you treasure, how you want to share it, and when you want to share it. All right. Our national team helps you earn money, keep money, and share money however you wish to do. And today we're going to talk about keeping your money. That's what asset protection is. It's looking out at the landscape of the world and saying, who do we not want to be able to take what we have worked hard for? It's using whatever tools, devices, and methods are available to us to keep your hard-earned booty in your control. We're talking about asset protection. I put a donkey in the ad. I couldn't do the whole 20 minutes without going to booty, all right? So, and I got a feeling that our willingness to talk, regular people talk about these complex subjects is one of the reasons so many of you decided to join us today. All right. Asset protection isn't about what you own. It's about what you control. And under the law, those are two entirely different concepts. Things that are in your control are yours, essentially. So you don't necessarily have to own things in your individual name to enjoy the use and benefit of them. So a lot of the concepts that we look to are maintaining control or a certain degree of control while enjoying the benefit of a certain asset, while perhaps not individually owning it. All right. Key concept here, guys. Asset protection isn't just for rich people. Yes, many wealthy families excel at taking advantage of whatever asset protection is out there. You remember the old muffler, Midas muffler commercial? Midas, of course, was the king who turned everything to gold. And the old rich guy in the back of the limo says, how does a man like me get to be a man like me? It was that he was saving pennies on using Midas to do his car repair. But the idea is he was also looking for every angle to keep his money once he had earned it. And that's what asset protection really is about. So if you need to think of King Midas or that little old man in the back of that car, that's who we want you to be. So, but asset protection isn't only for the wealthy. In fact, it might be even more important. It might be even more important for the middle class and below, because what wealth we've earned, we really need to keep. All right. It's about keeping as much as possible of what you've earned for who you want, including, I'm pointing at you, including yourself. All right. So you're right in the middle of this picture when we're looking at it. So the first strategy we want to take is to make sure that you are taking every advantage under the United States tax code. There is nothing wrong. There is nothing wrong with following the law that allows you to keep as much money in your pocket as possible. You know, this initial broadcast is during the COVID pandemic. And a lot of people are overjoyed that the government has cut them back a check, or that the government has deposited money in our bank accounts. Folks, that's not their money they're giving us. That's our money that we paid into the system that they're giving us back. That's your money. And so our goal is for you to pay only the minimum required amount into the government coffers, because I promise you that's what other citizens are doing. So who is asset protection from? Who are we protecting your assets from? From lawsuits. I was a litigator. Many of you know that for the first 15 years or so of my legal career, now entering its 35th year, I went to court. And I often like to say that I often won cases that perhaps on the facts I should not have. And I know that my clients and I lost cases where I felt like they were in the right. Lawsuits are a roll of the dice, and our American culture is very lawsuit happy. You can tell that from the ads on TV at any given time. And those lawsuits are an effort for one person to take wealth away from another person. All right. So I like to say in America, anybody can sue anybody for anything. That's the way our courts are set up. Now listen, what they can collect against is what you own. Often what they can collect against is not what you control. So we want to protect you against lawsuits, because really the courthouse, my whole point here, is somewhat of a roll of the dice. You may think you're right, but by the time it's over, you spent a lot of money with litigation lawyers to get a judge to decide who was right. And a lot of times they're not going to decide with you. Liens, all sorts of different liens, from city, county liens to liens from contractors to the lien on your car to the lien on your house. We're going to try to protect you from every different kind of lien which might be against something you own, inclusive of a judgment lien, of course. All right. I often like to say we're trying to protect you from your future son-in-law. My colleague loves to tell a story of a lady, his client, who said, you know, in all of this planning, the thing I want you to keep in mind is that I hate my son-in-law. And he leaned back and chuckled and said, but your daughter's only 6 years old. And the lady says, yeah, but I hate him already. The idea in asset protection is that sometimes our children, our families are going to make some bad decisions, and we want to make sure that we protect them financially from those bad decisions in the future. Why this is so very important. Statistics show that for those families that do accumulate wealth, they go from rags to riches and back to rags again, typically within 3 generations. So multi-generational asset planning is really, really important for families who intend to grow in the American dream, in the American system. There are an array of tools, devices, and methodologies we can use for this. The time this morning is too short to go into all of them, but I'm going to touch on some of the concepts now. The first is to take something you own individually and put it into a business entity. In all likelihood, it might be a limited liability company, commonly known as an LLC, or a corporation, the small one of which is typically referred to as a sub-S corp. There are various considerations in doing either of those at this point in time. In Florida, the single member LLC is not favored for asset protection. I know I can discuss that another time with you if that's of interest to you. So after about 20 or so years of using the LLC, even for single members, we're often defaulting back to the sub-S corporation for asset protection now. Really important concept, guys. I know folks all the time want to just jump on the computer and go online and set up a business entity. If an entity is not set up properly, and if it doesn't continue to follow the required statutory formalities, it might as well have never even been formed in the first place, because it's going to be pierced and it will not provide the asset protection that you originally wanted. Trusts, particularly irrevocable trusts. A trust is, as we talked about in another of the segments, very broad category. There are tons of different kinds of trusts. Typically, the irrevocable trust is the one we use for asset protection, or maybe a land trust, which is a whole nother animal altogether. The irrevocable trust is a manner of relinquishing a degree of control over the asset to someone that you have good faith and confidence in, and therefore making it bulletproof on the asset protection side. Retirement fans. I've got plenty of fans. There's one up there on the ceiling right now. Retirement plans, particularly qualified plans like IRAs and others, these are excellent vehicles for asset protection. Another one used by the financial planners is annuities. Very good asset protection device. In Florida, as we talked about on a previous segment, the homestead is one of the best asset protection devices. If you were not on that call, on that Zoom webinar, please go back and check it out, because Florida Homestead is one of the greatest asset protection devices we have. And if that's particularly interesting to you, we will be glad to follow up in an offline session with you. So, tenants by the entireties. Owning things in this particular ownership device is a great asset protection device. It is available to married couples, but it can go beyond only the homestead, obviously, to own other things by tenants by the entirety. There are some exceptions to this, such as cars, boats, recreational vehicles, because of liability involved with those. So we want to particularly specifically discuss what you're talking about transferring by tenants by the entireties before you do so. I think this will be a really good point in this session to point out that we're here just to discuss the law with you, to give you some general concepts so you can think about them in your lifetime planning. Obviously, the discussion we're having today is not intended to be legal advice, and you are not entitled to take it as such. I would be very pleased to work with you, but the mere fact that we're doing a webinar is not the act of giving legal advice to your particular circumstance. Insurance. How do you know how much is enough? You know, there are runaway juries all over the place, and should you do an inadvertent act of negligence that causes harm to another person, hurts somebody else, and your insurance is exceeded, they can come after your personal assets. So we want to look at all sorts of different insurance, some of which are protected, are asset protective devices. Life insurance is one that comes immediately to mind. Of course, there are all sorts of umbrella policies and homeowners policies, liability policies, things that you'll want to consider in your overall asset plan. A few more. One possibility when you place things in certain devices like charitable trust is considering life insurance to re-inherit your heirs. That way, that asset which you intended to give to your heirs may get you that asset which you intended to give to your heirs may get you a tax break now with some asset protection, and then you re-inherit the heirs through purchasing life insurance. College savings plans, great thought. Asset protected device for a family that has children who are not yet of college age, an excellent choice. Some other asset protection ideas include prenuptial agreements and flat out gifts. You know, if you know that you have enough that you can use the tax code gifts to your advantage, getting those things out of your personal name can be a great asset protection opportunity. So one of the things I told you about, that national team that I'm working on that excels in estate planning and excels in asset protection, one of the things that we do is an objective opportunity analysis. Basically, we look at your individual situation and run it through some metrics with regard to future taxes and planning for both you and your heirs, and can recommend ways that you may wish to change your current strategy, both for estate planning and for asset protection. We would love to discuss the objective opportunity analysis with you. The reason it's objective is most of the recommendations that come out of it are not things that we're in the business of providing. It's just that we want to be the one who helps you understand what you really need to protect your personal situation. And then you can consider whether it be insurance or financial planning of certain kinds, certain accounts, who the professional is that you want to work with on that basis. I have a question for you, and this is a great point in time for me to ask that if you have a question for me, you go ahead and type it into the chat bar. the question I have for you is, would it be important to you to preserve what you've earned and to pass it on to whomever you choose? And I would add to that, and to keep it for yourself for the remainder of your lifetime. Assuming your response to that is in the affirmative, which for most people that I consult with it is, really you have to fight for your family. You know, it's not a great thing to think about every day, but a lot of us are at home during this point in time, and it is an opportunity for us to think about these things and do some planning to protect the rest of your life and those you love who come after you. It's a serious but solvable situation, and we have some choices to make. If you would like to discuss this, we're happy to get with you offline. The final thought is, waiting may be the hardest part, Tom Petty, but waiting too long can be fatal to your asset protection plan. So I would encourage you to get started as soon as possible. Next week, again at 9 a.m. on Thursday, we are going to talk about extending this subject a little bit and talk specifically about Medicaid planning and discuss that a little bit at that point in time. I am completely surprised not to see a single question on the chat board. I thought this was going to be the week of questions. I'm going to assume, therefore, that I have completely covered the subject of asset protection to everyone's complete satisfaction. I'm joking. There's no way that in 22 minutes I possibly could do that, although I think we have raised a lot of good questions for you that you may want to seek answers to. Okay, I'm going to say going once. Oh, thank you. I've got one. Yeah, that's a great suggestion. So I talked a little bit about irrevocable or irrevocable, pronunciation doesn't matter, trusts this morning. When you hear irrevocable, you kind of wonder what's revocable. Well, a revocable trust is a basic touchstone of an asset plan that you put into place, which helps you to avoid probate. We did a whole hour on our whole Zoom on probate not too long ago. It helps you avoid probate and keep a lot more assets in your family by doing so. The revocable trust, often called a living trust and Revivos trust, it has a lot of names, is basically so that you pass what you care about through your trust and don't have to go through the probate. It really saves your family a lot of money, time, headaches, and hassle. But importantly, it is not an asset protection device as far as outside creditors. Is it expensive to do this? How long does it take? I'll take those in reverse order. We certainly can get a trust in effect within a month, usually significantly less than that, a couple of weeks. Is it expensive? I would say this to you. Compared to the cost of losing assets to an outside creditor, of the 80% of Americans who go through probate and suffer a reduced estate by up to 60%, certainly going to be 10%. The cost is minimal. I would tell you that the cost of putting in even an irrevocable trust, which is a little more expensive than a revocable trust, is less than the average vacation and typically less than even the attorney's fees, the base attorney's fees and cost of filing the probate action. So it's really money better spent now by you to preserve your legacy, to make things easy for your heirs, than the more that they'll spend later. So in my opinion, it's not a cheap item, but it's really important to families, and the great value that a family gets out of it certainly offsets the expense. How often should a living trust be updated? Great question. And oh, two more great questions. Thank you. So we check in with our clients regularly, but I believe that a living trust should be reviewed at least once every 3 years. In fact, I think every estate planning document, from a will to a living trust to an irrevocable trust, should be reviewed at least every 3 years, if not more often. Changes just happen in folks' lives in that period of time, and usually revisions are needed. The main point I would like to make about that is not only when a certain period of time passes, but when you have major life changes. I've often suggested marriages, divorces, children being born, coming into your life, grandchildren, or even folks dying in your family, will make a change in your estate plan, and therefore your trust and or will should be reviewed. Does it matter if it was prepared in another state? It can matter a lot. A lot of times other states don't have the same signing requirements we have. Back when I was a litigator, I had to address this issue with the probate court, and it was really expensive for my client, and I felt bad for him because the will had been done, I believe, in New York, one of the northeastern states. Somebody had retired down here, as so many folks do. And the signing requirements weren't the same in that state. We had to find the witnesses, find the retired lawyer who'd done it, and get affidavits from them. It was quite an arduous process, difficult process. Had this gentleman's mother gone to a lawyer, a very simple affidavit would have allowed us to avoid that entire process. So if for anyone who knows someone who's new to Florida, they really ought to have their estate plan updated. So typically we do have a cost of about $425 for an initial appointment regarding an estate plan. I will, just for your being on this call, I need to think of a good code. If you will give a code word, then I will waive that initial consultation if you'll make that appointment before the end of the day on, what's today? Is today May 7th? On Friday at 5, May 8th, if you'll make that appointment. And give the code word donkey, our cute little donkey from our invitation to this, I think would be a great code. Call the office, make an appointment. We'd love to help you out. All right, great. Oh, hugs right back. Thank you. I like getting hugs for legal discussions. You know, I got to tell you, during this pandemic, one of the things I miss the most is hugs. My kids are getting more hugs than they ever wanted during this period of time just because I'm allowed to hug them. I've often said Rock Solid Law exists for a lot of our clients to drop in for a periodic hug, and they'll make an excuse to come by. And I used to just love those hugs. Missing you guys. So when this all lets up, save me up a good one. I will review paperwork submitted prior to an appointment, assuming my workflow will allow me to. It's great to get it in. I like your code word, but I'm going to stick with mine. Good friends. Hey guys, I'm not seeing any more questions. I'm just going to scan to make sure I didn't miss any. Those were excellent questions from you all. Really enjoyed spending this Zoom time with you today. Thank you so much for tuning in to talk about protecting our assets. You know I had to do it at least one time, right? And we're going to go back and let you on the way out. Enjoy Lionel Richie and the Commodores one more time. Hope to see you in real life soon. Be well.